What a headshot! What a head!
How's it, guys? This is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video, I'm going to take you guys through the pricing mistakes that FPL made this season. So I'll be taking you guys through all the undervalued options, the overvalued options, because yes, even though FPL this season has basically undervalued everyone, there still are some surprise options that are actually overpriced. Now you guys absolutely loved this video last season, so hopefully you show this video a similar amount of love in the comments down below, and let me know in the comments down below which option you think FPL underpriced the most. Now if you guys are new to this channel, hopefully you will join us for this FPL season. Hopefully we get another top 10k finish, 3 in the last 4 seasons since making YouTube, but my rank doesn't matter as long as your rank is improving, so hopefully hit that subscribe button if you are new, otherwise enjoy this video. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. Now before we get into the actual graphs and the details of which players are underpriced or overpriced, I'm going to be telling you guys the criteria I used in this video. It's a little bit of a boring talking point, but this is important to note when you guys are assessing your own players, your own data analysis, that sort of thing. So just please keep these points in mind throughout the video. So the first talking point is that my criteria for selection, so in order for these players to actually be selected, they had to fulfill the criteria of at least 60 points from last season's results. So how I arrived at about 60 points was I thought that 50 points is a little bit too low. 60 points is basically playing 30 games with the minimum of 2 points, and in my opinion that's not a lot. So either these options have to be one, nailed, or they have to have come in maybe in January and had some good performances, got some goals, maybe 1 or 2 assists, and that would have taken them over the 60 mark. So just please keep that in mind if you don't see your favorite option like a Ben Chilwell, who only scored about 50 points last season. Then what I've done on every single graph, I've gone from goalkeepers to forwards, and then I've also plotted a linear regression line. So simple linear regression, no fancy formulas here. I just want to give you guys kind of an average line of points so that you guys can use that when you're looking at your options. So obviously you guys can go more in depth into the averaging, but I just thought for a nice YouTube video, a simple start is going to be a linear regression line. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys have got any more algorithms or maybe any more plotting styles that you prefer, and we can kind of have a discussion either on YouTube or on my newly formed Discord channel. So now let's get on to the actual plot. So these plots were done in Python using Matplotlib. If you guys do use Python, a pretty simple package there, so you guys can make these own graphics if you want to using the FPL API. But if you don't want to do that, I've done it for you, so just sit back and let's look at the data. So if you guys have watched my video from last season, you know exactly what's happening on this graph, but if you don't, what I've done is I've plotted the points from last season versus the price of this season. So basically what I want to see here is that when we look at the points of last season, have FPL underpriced or overpriced these options, because when choosing a price, they'll obviously have looked at how they've performed over the prior FPL seasons. Now, in order to determine what value an option does have or if they're overpriced or underpriced, you do look at the linear regression line. So nicely in red there, hopefully you guys aren't colorblind, but the line that you see diagonal through the data is going to be that linear regression line, and that kind of averages all these options that you see on screen. So I'm going to use an example here. Let's take Allison at the top. So top right there, Allison. How to determine if he's undervalued or overvalued is you look if he's on the left-hand side or the right-hand side of that linear regression line. So as you guys can see, obviously he's on the left-hand side and he's quite a far distance from it. And therefore, the further they are away, the better or worse options they are. So obviously you guys can see that Allison looks to be a great option. It's a little bit weird what FPL have done with goalkeepers this season. They've seemed to underprice them quite a lot, and they've actually given us a decision to make. Because if you guys do know me, I always go for a cheap goalkeeper, nice 4.5 and a 4.0 on the bench. But this season might actually change, and I'll show you guys the value comparisons between these positions at the end of the video. But let's go back to my old self here. Let's look at the 4.5 options. You can see that Sanchez is the highest rated 4.5 option on points last season. But here comes in the first limitation of this graph. So as you guys can see, Raya there, a popular option, but unfortunately last season had quite a long-term injury and therefore only played a few games. So when looking at Raya on this graph, you're probably thinking to yourself, why are so many people going for him? But when I do actually do my video on the best goalkeepers to look at, I'll be looking at value and value per minutes, and then he looks like a much better option. So just please keep that in mind that there are some 2 limitations there. The first one is if they had some injuries, such as a Raya, but then also if they came in the January transfer window, they would have only had half a season, and therefore that would have affected their total points. An initial inspection of this 4.5 goalkeepers already spoke about Sanchez, but also Guaita, as he was rotating at the end of last season with Butland, and therefore he also missed some games. So just imagine if Guaita did start every single fixture. Crystal Palace towards the end of last season had improved dramatically defensively, so he might have actually been the best 4.5 to look at. So when choosing my goalkeeper now, yes, I've gone for Raya in my first drafts, but the current Crystal Palace first choice goalkeeper is going to be in the back of my mind, because if you can nail down a selected option, that should be a great 4.5 goalkeeper. Kind of going up the list, you do have a Saar from Wolves, also looks like a great option there. But then we're going to focus on the overpriced options, which are going to be Lloris and then also Edison. Now these two options are very slightly overpriced. I think Lloris at 5.0 million would have been too far-fetched. I think it's probably why most people wanted him to be 5. And then also Edison, 5.5 seems to be a great price for him because he should compete with Alisson for that golden glove. Around that 5.0 mark, a lot of very well-priced kind of options, a little bit overpriced there, but I think a lot of these options should be where they are. So in terms of the goalkeepers, I think most of the positions or prices are pretty strong with only 1 or 2 overpriced options. Let me know in the comments down below, what goalkeeper are you guys going for? Are you going for the great value in Alisson at 5.5? Or are you sticking like me to a 4.5? And which one are you going for? So post-production Dave, you're going to hop on this track right now. I realized that I did not tell you guys about Benjamin Mendy or mention Benjamin Mendy when he's been in so many managers' drafts. So if you guys can navigate to that 5.0 goalkeeper mark, you can see that Benjamin Mendy slightly overpriced in terms of points from last season. So please remember this when you are selecting him in your drafts. I just think that FPL have actually got his price right. He's not overpriced or underpriced. He's probably around comparable to those other 5.0 goalkeepers, and that's why I personally won't be looking at him. Now obviously if Chelsea have a resurgence defensively, but with so many centre-backs lost from that first 11, I think I'm going to wait and see for him, and that's how I'd rather go for a more expensive option like an Edison or Alisson, or go cheaper at 4.5. But that's just my 2 cents. Put in the comments down below if you guys agree with me. Do you think he's overpriced, underpriced, or just right at 5.0? But let's shift our attention to the defenders, a bit more of an exciting position here. The defenders for the 22/23 FPL season look like absolute gold, and there's so many options to go for. I've seen most drafts have 5 at the back. But which 5 defenders should you guys be looking at? Well, first off, in terms of the prices that these players do come in at, I will actually say that FPL seems to have got it bang on the money with certain options like an Alexander-Arnold and then also a Robertson. As you guys can see, almost fitting directly on the linear regression line. So this might actually be a turn into whether Trent should have gone up in price or stayed the same. Now this does actually depend on the average of defenders, which is a lot higher than the other positions. Defenders offer some of the best value in the game, and therefore I do still think that Trent should have come in more expensive at 8.0. But nevertheless, he's 7.5, that's what we're going to buy him at, and I'm pretty sure he'll be in most of your guys' teams, along with Robertson and then probably Cancelo. So Cancelo seems to be underpriced here. I was actually expecting him to be about 7.5. I think it would have been a better price to have him at. So it is a little bit strange that FPL decided to make him 7.0. Van Dijk and Matip, the fellow Liverpool defenders, also come in underpriced. They have some relatively good points, and I mean Van Dijk is as nailed as it gets in that Liverpool lineup, so the centre-back could be an enticing option if you want to go for a cheaper Liverpool defender. We then have a centre-back like a Laporte, who although those centre-backs for Man City get rotated, still at a relatively good points return, and he could be one of those options you guys should actually be looking at. We then have Diaz and James, who come in around that 6.0 million mark. Just remember that Chilwell's not going to be on this radar because he actually missed most of last season because he only scored 50 points. But James was a similar situation, had a lot of injuries there. Diaz had that rotation, so I do think those players are relatively well priced, but if they do start the majority of games this season, I think they will actually be underpriced. Now we head on to the absolute mess. That's going to be from 4.5 to about 5.5, so please just ignore this section when I do analyze the defenders in their own video. This will become a lot clearer. I'll kind of clear up the clutter here, but I wanted to show you guys all the options just to give you guys a taste of what's to come. So if you guys can kind of decipher whatever option you want to look at there, I know it's kind of a mess with all the labels, I do apologize, but as I said, the video is going to come up where the view will be a lot clearer, but there are some really nice underpriced 5.0 defenders and 4.5 defenders. So you guys will know from the first draft video that the 4.5 slot is absolutely stacked. It's actually quite interesting to see who were the best performers from last season. I don't know about you guys, but I've not seen an Anderson, a Janssen, a Mings in many drafts, and these options had the best points returns from that 4.5 slot. Then in terms of the 5.0 options, so a play like a Cody still providing good value for money from Wolves. We have a Cash from Aston Villa that seems to be quite attacking. He could be a great option to go for. Then also Gabriel seems to be the best Arsenal defender if you guys can stretch your budget to a 5.0. Cucurella is a little bit of an interesting one there. Will he get the transfer to Man City? If he does, is he nailed? Because if he is nailed, a 5.0 defender from Man City is going to be absolute gold. But you guys can kind of pause the video right now or just wait for my defender video coming up a little bit later, probably next week, where we all take a deeper dive into what are the best defenders to go for. We're now going to take a look at arguably the best position in FPL, or at least the most exciting position, and that's going to be the midfield slot. Now the midfielders always provide that great value for money, but the most important thing about a good premium midfielder is they probably provide the best captaincy option in most game weeks. When you look at the points from last season versus the price of this season graph, you guys can see at the top right there, Salah, Son coming in hot at those massive 250 plus points returns, and they definitely justify the price if you look at the linear regression line. I mean, how can Salah at 13.0 million be underpriced? Who kind of knows? He's definitely the best FPL player ever in the game. And I'm just hoping that this season he can replicate the prior 4 seasons and not be a 5-season wonder. In terms of Human Son, also looks like great value. I just worry about maybe some regression to that line this season if he struggles to replicate the form of last season. And then when we look at the Kevin De Bruyne, I was actually quite interested to see that he's actually overpriced. Now obviously with KDB, definitely no one's arguing that he's not a great option, but in terms of FPL, was quite surprised here, but that's probably due to his injury record not being that great. Now the first talking point that comes up about a midfielder is that I know that Haaland versus KDB has been quite a hot debate to go on, but what I would kind of argue is that if you're looking at KDB, why are you not looking at Son when their points difference was so great last season? I guess that's probably why I'm going for Haaland right now, is that I don't want this argument of going for Son versus De Bruyne, as they do come in at the same price. Moving down the list, we have Sterling and Fernandes, and I kind of call this the no-go zone. Yes, both of these options are wait and sees probably. Sterling just signing for Chelsea potentially. He could be a great option there, but at that price point of 10.0, that's just too much for me when I have a mounted 8.0. We then have Fernandes, who yes, with Ronaldo leaving Manchester United, we could have the return of Fernandes, but at 10.0, that's a wait and see, and I would rather not go for United options under the new manager. Going down the list there, I'm going to talk about Bowen when we talk about value, but in terms of the 8.0 options, this is where you guys can see Kulusevski and Diaz. So if you guys look at the 8.0, just cast your eyes down the y-axis, and both of these two options came in January's transfer window, and therefore it's not really fair to include them on this graph. It's going to be interesting to see when we look at kind of value and value per 90 minutes if these two assets are high up on the list, but right now just ignore them, and when we talk about midfielders, I'll talk about them in a bit more detail. Keeping on with that 8.0 midfielder slot, I think it's a great kind of price point. Lots of great options there. I personally am looking at a Saka or maybe even a Foden or a Mahrez now that Sterling's going to leave to Chelsea. But as you guys can see, the best points return in that bracket was actually James Maddison from Leicester. So I've literally seen Maddison in no one's draft, so it's quite interesting to see if you guys can time it right with those lovely Leicester fixtures that might not be at the start of the season, maybe later on. You guys can get a massive option at 8.0 million. Mount also deserves some recognition there. Great season last season. I think he'll only grow as a young option, so he could actually be a nice option to go for when those Chelsea fixtures improve. Other than that, we have yet another cluttered mess here. I do apologize for that one. I just wanted to show you guys, if you want to pause the video and look for a specific option, you guys can. But as I said, when I talk about the midfielders in their own individual video, I'll clean up this mess quite a bit. Here and there though, you guys will notice some nice options there. Rashford, he caught my eye at 6.5. We have a Grealish at 7.0. Is he going to start on that left wing for the majority of games? Who kind of knows? If he does, great asset to go for. But I think right now, Mahrez and Foden look slightly more attractive at that extra 1 million. There's a lot to digest in this midfielder graph, so I'm going to leave that for the individual video. But if you guys have any questions, drop them down below and I'll get to them as soon as possible. And now the final position of this video is going to be the forward department, and guys, spoiler alert here, the forwards last season were not great at all. I mean, I don't have to tell you that. If you guys played last season, you'll know that basically no forward was worth owning except for maybe Harry Kane towards the end of last season, maybe even Ivan Toney because he provided quite a few goals for that Brentford side. So when looking at the graph that I did create, just keep this in mind that the linear regression line is comparing from a positional point of view, but if we did compare this to the midfielder regression line, all these players would be overpriced. But comparing forwards to forwards, Harry Kane comes in underpriced. We have Ronaldo that will be departing. Will he go to Chelsea? If he goes to Chelsea, might be an option there. But in terms of where I'm kind of looking, I'm looking at more of the cheaper options. The one I will highlight from the more expensive department is going to be Jota, but please keep in mind that he has now been reconfirmed as a forward instead of a midfielder. So that's going to be a loss of a clean sheet point and also a loss of a point for every goal. So his points total as a forward would have been slightly less than this, but still a great option if he does start for Liverpool in the majority of games. But I think I'll be focusing around that 7.57 million mark. We also have some great 6.56 million forwards, but I think 7.5 to 7 is kind of the sweet spot if you want value. You guys can see that an Antonio and a Toney look like great value there. A Watkins, a full season under Stevie G might be quite an attacking one, and therefore he could be a nice option to go for. Otherwise, Mbeumo could be great value, but just remember, like Jota, reclassified as a forward from a midfielder last season. Other than that, I'm not going to focus on the forwards too much because like most drafts, only have one, and I'll discuss all the important talking points in the individual video later on. So now kind of summarizing what you guys have seen on screen, what I wanted to do is that we haven't spoken about value at all, so I want to give you guys a little bit of a taste, a little bit of an appetizer for the future videos coming up, and I'm going to give you guys the top 3 from each position in a value comparison. So as you guys can see on screen here, I've gone from goalkeepers to forwards, each in their own individual color, and I've plotted the top 3 value options from each position. So how to calculate value is basically the distance from the point to the regression line of each of these options, or what you could have done is take the gradient, which is going to be the points divided by the price. So as you guys can see on screen here that there is a large discrepancy between all of the options. Yes, it's only from 20 points to 32, but that's in terms of points per million. So the first cluster of points we're going to talk about are going to be the forwards, and the top 3 forwards coming in are going to be first Jota, second Mbeumo, and then Tony. So yes, we actually have the 2 Brentford forwards here. Yes, Mbeumo was a midfielder, same as Jota, so just please remember that their value will actually go down because of the loss of that clean sheet point and that extra point per goal. But if we did take their points from last season, these are the top 3 options. So I really like the look of Tony. He was in my kind of initial draft before the prices were released. I like those Brentford fixtures. I like Tony as an option. But without Christian Eriksen in that midfielder slot, will Tony's goals go down? Jota another option if he manages to stay in that Liverpool front 3. Who knows if Darwin Núñez is going to be the kind of sure starter in that number 9. Maybe Jota can start on the left and in the centre, so he's more of a kind of utility option. But if Jota does play the majority of games for Liverpool, I still don't think he's great value at 9.0. The next cluster to go over is going to be the midfielder slot, and I just want to say here guys that these are going to be more budget options. We don't have a Salah and a Son here, but where Salah and Son really have their weight in gold is on captaincy. But in terms of strictly points per million, it's going to be these 3 options. So first of all, we have Gallagher, who had a massive season for Crystal Palace, especially the first half of last season. But with him returning to Chelsea, who kind of knows what value he will hold? We then have Jared Bowen at 8.5. Now, the interesting thing about Jared Bowen is I think that he started last season at about 6.0, 6.5, and now he's 8.5, so a massive jump in points there. But yet again, if he manages to replicate what he did last season for West Ham, he still have a great season for FPL. And then finally, we have Ward-Prowse. I would not have guessed that Ward-Prowse would have been the best value for money midfielder in the game, but he definitely is an anomaly for the stats side of FPL. And the reason I'm saying that is that if you look at his XG versus his goals, there's a large discrepancy between the two because he is an absolute free kick merchant. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. The man is just talented at free kicks, and that's why his XG is so low, but his goals are so high. Now, I definitely won't be shelling out about 6.5 for Ward-Prowse. I think it's a little bit out of my bracket to go for him. I just don't really know how sustainable free kick goals are, and that's why the Southampton midfielder will be out of my team probably. But if you guys are strictly on value, great asset to go for, but as I said personally, I probably wouldn't go for him. Now we head on to the really good value for money options. As you guys know, throughout the previous seasons, defenders and goalkeepers are absolute prime for value per million because they are so cheap. Now the top 3 defenders actually are going to be Cancelo, Gabriel, and then also Cash. So Cancelo's a nice surprising one there because even though he was on the more expensive side last season, he still has great value for money this season as long as he does start. As you guys know, with Pep Roulette, there's always going to be some rotation. I just hope that Cancelo starts either at left back or right back because he is an absolute machine. I just hope that his attacking points replicate his expected attacking points. Gabriel already spoke about him, the best Arsenal asset to go for. I think he's the most nailed centre back and also provides an attacking threat. Even though he does come in at 5.0, I don't think many options will go for him as they do favour Tomiyasu and Ben White. And then finally, Matty Cash for Aston Villa, great defender, attacking threat and defensive threat. And I think absolute gold if Aston Villa can shore up and get a few clean sheets. Now you guys might be actually asking me, why do I only see one whiter plot for these goalkeepers? But in actual fact, the second and third best value goalkeepers correlate with the number 1 and number 2 of the defenders. So massive kind of coincidence there. I don't really know how that's kind of happened, but we do have Lloris and Sarr at the number 3 and 2 best value goalkeepers. So Lloris at 5.5 and then we have Sarr at 5.0. I don't think many options will kind of go for them. I think a Perisic is slightly more enticing at the same price point from that Spurs defense as he does offer that massive attacking threat. But now going on to the number 1 best value option in FPL based on these current prices and the points from last season. You guys have probably guessed that I spoke about him a lot. I use them as an example in the goalkeepers. But the best value option in the game, not even just in terms of goalkeepers, but in the game, is going to be Alisson from Liverpool. So comes in at 5.5, had a great season last season. Yes, he did not score a goal last season like he did in the previous season, but he still did offer some save points and some clean sheets. So yes, if you guys want to go for an option based on value, points per million, Alisson is your man to go for. However, that will take up your third Liverpool slot, probably. And unfortunately, that's where it kind of comes in. I do think I'd rather go for Robertson or Luis Diaz over Alisson, but this does kind of put a thought in my mind. But should I go for the Brazilian because he provides such good value? Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. Should you go for Alisson? Should you not? I think I'll probably stick with my triple up of Robbo, Trent, and Salah in my last draft. And now the final talking point before we wrap up the video, I'm going to show you guys the value comparison in terms of the regression line. So what I did was I took the equation of each of these positions from defender, goalkeepers, midfielders, and forwards, and I plotted them against each other just to show you guys the comparison. So as you guys can see here, the goalkeepers and the defenders are definitely the best value for money, but what I will say is that please don't look at the x-axis. I've simply extended this line for a comparison reason, but obviously you can't buy a 10 million defender or a 10 million goalkeeper. So we just focus on the 4.5 to about 8 bracket there in terms of the lines. I just wanted to show you guys for a comparison reason if I was to extend it. Now we all know that defenders and goalkeepers provide the best value for money. Just think about a 4.5 defender versus a 4.5 forward or midfielder. I mean, you're always going to go for the defender because they actually play and could get you clean sheets and maybe even some attacking returns. A 4.5 midfielder or forward might not even play. I mean, there's no 4.5 forwards, as I know, that actually are going to start the Premier League season, but there are a couple 4.5 midfielders that do look quite enticing. The reason for this graph is that there's been quite a lot of talk about whether we should go big at the back, but I do think you guys have to have a comparison between a 4.5 defender and a midfielder if you want to look at that. So what you guys can kind of do is take your combinations, look at an 8 million midfielder and a 4.5 defender, add them together, see how much value you have, then split that up, see if you want to maybe go for a 5.5 midfielder and so on and so forth, and just see using these averages what the kind of points difference comes out as. But please note that I'll be going a little bit more in depth into all these positions from goalkeepers to forwards in the upcoming videos, and I'll be going over value and value per 90 minutes played just to give you guys a better representation of every FPL asset that you guys should be having in those drafts. But this is basically up the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like if you did and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. I'll be seeing you guys for massive content coming up, so please put that bell notification on or just follow me on Twitter as I do tweet every time I upload a video. Otherwise, join my Discord channel for more discussions as we'll be having a kind of draft review where I'll be taking teams from that Discord. But I'm signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL and I'm out. Cheers. Bye.